Well, hi, it's Joe Wainz from TurtleWorks with another episode of the Power of Productivity. I'm joined today with Darryl Dexter from Area 87, and I'll give Darryl a minute to talk about himself. But first, TurtleWorks provides simplification of the front and back office of manufacturing companies using Microsoft 365. I like to think of myself as a productivity lever and my team, of course. So um, Today we're gonna talk about what it is that you do, Darryl, and that's basically simplifying complex software, or another way to call that is digital product strategy. Can
Yeah,
you take 30 seconds and sort of introduce yourself and maybe talk a bit about Area 87
yeah,
and get
sure.
into the
So,
meat of it?
yeah, Daryl, I am the founder of Area 87. We are primarily a product strategy shop. For those who aren't as familiar with product strategy in the digital space, think of applications and software and such. And what we like to focus on is the user experience. Historically, if you think about applications in the past, they typically are built by very technical people, and we like to introduce design thinking as our north star for making sure that whatever product we build, it's aligned with the human that's working with that product. Most of our efforts have been in healthcare and finance, and those are notorious areas that can have very dense and technical applications, and we aim to simplify those applications.
Hmm. All right, perfect. Well done, I'll say. So, I always like to get questions going to prompt people thinking about how am I looking at the way I'm managing projects, or how am I looking at the business, and where am I thinking wrong? So, when you engage a client, one of the questions you mentioned to me that you use is, like, have you considered what the time and cost savings will be for this new widget you're asking us to build?
Yeah.
So in my mind, it's a perfect question. It's it's proof that you're not trying to sell them something. You're really interested in trying to help them. But
hmm
I'm interested in what kind of answers you get when you ask that question.
Well, first off, I typically try to convince people to not build the future. In many cases, it's an idea, not so much an opportunity yet, and it takes time to take those ideas and apply strategy against them and see if it's a viable opportunity to build something. Um, it's not fun taking these initiatives, like a new project or a new feature. It has a life cycle behind it, and it's not fun to put so much energy and effort behind it and it not show a value add for the people using it or the company itself. So
No, no.
yeah,
I
it's
was
not
in a
fun working on.
conversation yesterday. We were just talking about software projects, and years ago, the failure rate was like 80%.
Of
Software
software.
projects were failures. Um, I suspect that was before Agile and Scrum and a whole bunch of other, I'll say, software engineering techniques that have come on board. So I believe the number has to be down, but it,
I don't think it
it's an
went down.
undertaking. It is an undertaking, and there are plenty of failed projects. I've been part of some, unfortunately, and it
So,
hurts. Like,
some of my
yeah.
best work is in the graveyard. Some of the work I pride myself on, some of the work I learned the most on, it landed in a graveyard for reasons I can't control. But
Hmm.
with these methodologies, like Agile and Scrum and better tooling around facilitating the whole creative process, it has improved the accuracy, but it also introduced many people making, more pieces of software. So I don't think the number went down in terms of failures, but I do think that the success rate of a lot of projects have, skyrocketed, obviously.
Okay. So I'm triggered by a story when I was in college. Dan Shoemaker was one of the profs, and he's sitting up in front of class, sort of leaning against the table, and he's like, I got this dog. And anytime I open the door, that dog wants to run out the front, down the street. And someday he's going to get killed. And then he looked at us and said, programmers are like my dog. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what they're going to accomplish, but they got to go. And I'll say not only programmers, but many times I'm talking with executives who are trying to get something done because they need that dopamine hit or whatever it is. And they're not actually going to succeed. They're not going to make things better. So you're asking a good question. Yeah. Doesn't make you any money, by the way, if they say, you're right, we don't need to build this.
I assume a lot of risk if I build something for someone and they have I work with lots of visionaries. They're not engineers, but I believe a lot of them wish they were engineers. They're typically the type that wants to be more aware of what's happening on a technical side, but they can't execute it themselves for whatever reason. And I would say, they get very excited about their ideas, but similar to the engineers that would possibly engineer in circles, I see a lot of visionaries toss these ideas out and essentially go in circles. And I come in and put guardrails on people's ideas. Most likely I try to convince them hey, there's other approaches, cheaper approaches, simpler approaches that have been tested and tried and work pretty well. But in a lot of cases, they have a vision that they need to get out and show the world. How we facilitate doing it, writing software is one way, but there's other ways to do it also.
You hit on something that I'm a bit passionate about is people have great ideas and they don't know how to bring them to life and they need some help. In my case, like Microsoft 365, some of the tools seem like you can figure it out yourself and people jump in and then start watching YouTube and whatever. And many of them just realize they got a job already and they can't figure it out. So their ideas either die or they reach out for help. In your case, and I'll say in my case as well, I got to vet those ideas. If I don't think it's going to work, I'm not going to promote it. I am not going to tell you, yeah, let's go down this road. I'm going to look for some other opportunity or some other solution to the problem. But what you're offering is definitely a service, making them think through what do we get at the end.
Yeah. And at the beginning, I have a process, a stepped process, because creative work, innovation work is naturally chaotic and messy. And in order to make it predictable and measurable, we have to have a process for it. The first step of the process is aligning with people. And usually that phase lets us know if this is an opportunity that we should move forward with. One part is extracting the vision out of the visionary's head and getting in front of everyone, putting some arrows and some boxes to just point to different things to see some type of sequential flow. The other part is understanding the competition, separating the competition from their inspiration. In a lot of cases, I would see people identify competition and also consider it inspiration. At that point, you're in an echo chamber. And this gets into some of the tools and techniques I use to bring people out of that echo chamber and truly see if this idea is worth moving forward with. Because if we don't do this, then we end up building something no one wants and it brings no one value. And ultimately, I get blamed for it. So I assume a lot of risk when building things that no one wants. So I take it as, a strong point for me to make sure that we're building something that brings everyone involved value.
Yeah, we have a responsibility, right? People look to us as trusted advisors, if you will, and we have a responsibility to follow through and deliver what they expect, and be frank. Yeah. All right, so let's see. People have great ideas. They want to build an app. If you tell people you make apps, it doesn't really help them understand the effort that goes into making a simple app do something that's complex. So I guess I want to reiterate the whole user experience is it's the process that people do to make something happen and how they interact with the software to enter a transaction or retrieve information or make something occur in the background. And looking at that process ahead of time so that it can be as simple as possible, but still do all of the things that need to be done. And that could be a complex thing. So let's dig into, hey, Darryl builds apps. I got this idea. Can you build me an app?
Well, first question is, what are you currently using instead of this app?
Mm-hmm. But my customers are using Excel.
You know, the world
but I
runs
don't know
on
what your
Excel.
customers are.
I would say over the years, I've been doing this for about 20 years now, probably 70% of the projects I pick up were previously Excel sheets or Google Sheets. In addition to Google Slides, the world runs on Excel. Fortunately and unfortunately, the caveat with that is it doesn't have the guardrails of like a custom application. Anyone can edit anything. Things are easily disorganized, et cetera, et cetera. But if they are using Excel, that's a great starting point, honestly, because the method is somewhat codified.
It's a terrible way to scale your business.
It's not a good way to scale your business. It is a good way to start your business, right? All of these businesses at the beginning are put together with duct tape and toothpicks, whether they have custom software or not. And it's what led to justifying more maturity, you know, and moving from a spreadsheet, because something's working if you want to move from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but usually that's my first question. What are you using now instead of your software that you want to build?
Okay. And is there a process of explaining how complex what they're trying to accomplish is, and to make it occur within a simple app? I mean, is there like an ignorance, I'll say, on their part that they just don't understand the effort involved? I remember years ago, somebody came to us and said, hey, we need to build a mobile app. And we needed to do these things. And I looked at it and said, okay, let me talk to some of my consultants. And I came back to them with a price that was like $100,000 to do what they wanted to do. $100,000.
Yeah, okay, sounds about right.
Yeah, and like they're thinking, hey, I can do this for 10. You know, and there's a reality check that there's a lot of work that goes involved in. And there's different ways to do apps, if you will, as well. But helping people understand. I guess what is a day in the life of Darryl when this occurs? When somebody says, "Hey, I've got an app. I need to do these 45 things, and I want it to work on a mobile phone." How do you walk through that?
I usually try to isolate the top 3 things. Every idea has, well, at least when it comes to this context, and someone wants to build some software, it's always 25 features or 30 features. It's usually an exhaustive list. My job is to help isolate what's most important for most people in the near future. And the complexity comes in many perspectives. Possibly you could get it built for 10,000. It wouldn't be phenomenal. You would probably run into language barriers because you need to think about labor arbitrage and price arbitrage, because you won't be able to get someone in the States. You may have to consider other parts of the world, which is more financially acceptable for you to build at that price point. And even if you do have like a larger budget, understanding how to spend it over what time frame and on what is important. And this is when strategy comes into place. So usually I try to think through getting a proof of concept built, a fraction of the cost. It's not going to be in all the app stores, but at least get you something in front of people to see how much they want it. If they don't want it, that's great. I mean, at least you know, because you didn't spend $100,000 building apps that no one wants. The app store is filled, probably 80% filled with applications that doesn't really need to be there. Another thing is it may not need to be in the App Store. Why does it need to be in the App Store? I can think of one example in past couple of weeks, actually, a healthcare application wanted to be in the App Store for its patients. Fun fact, patients don't want to download apps. Why are we putting this in the App Store, right? I don't want to download an app. And I've done research on this. I spoke to, everyone's a patient in some regard, and everyone has a physician. Most people I spoke with, 80%, 85 to be specific, did not want to download any extra app on their phone just to speak with their physician. And at this point, I have to communicate this information. It's valuable information that we should take and consider before just deciding, hey, we need something in the App Store.
But what you really have to tell them is you're not as important as you think. If I read through the lines, it's like you want to build an app and you think everybody wants your app, but you're just not that important to the people out there.
And you don't need it, it's apps, it's a loaded term nowadays. You can consider a web app an app, you consider a mobile app, an app. You use it in many contexts. In reality, you can still have an app, it just be a web app. People go to it on their browser, on their phone, nothing needed to be downloaded. And it's probably a fraction of the cost. It is a fraction of the cost.
And same, so that $100,000 app that we had the conversation about, this was a few years ago, we came back with the same thought processes. Like a web app will be a whole lot cheaper. And in some ways, it doesn't look any different. I'm thinking for my world, like Microsoft gives us some very cool tools that make it easy for us to not build apps, but people can still get functionality. So you can download the SharePoint app, and I can do all kinds of things inside of that app, or just browser in dealing with Teams or whatever. So in your case, you're walking them into, you still have a need, right? Your patients still need to get their information some way. So that's a valid requirement, and you are important in the fact that they need to know what it is that you're, the results you found. But they don't want to install an app just to do that, right? That's in some cases it's a one and done experience. I don't want to install an app just to find out that I don't have diabetes, right? Okay, great. I'm glad I don't have diabetes, but it's spent 10 minutes getting this thing going and logging in and whatever. Just going to a web page would be so much easier on the phone.
And prior to that, it was most likely a phone call. Like, hey, you don't have diabetes. Oh, cool, thanks. And you hang up the phone, right? It wasn't a huge barrier, but we have HIPAA compliance and things like that, and we do want to be mindful of that. And, later down the line, as the company matures, you could justify it. You can say, okay, we want to have a video feature. It needs to have some deeper level of security. A mobile app could justify. But if you're starting off, you don't want to jump right into the deep end. You want to stay in the shallow end for a bit, understand what you're building, why you're building it, who you're building it for, and if they appreciate it or not. I've seen people lose clients and patients because they made them go through this laborious process just because one person who most likely never built an app before or managed an application, they had a vision, but that vision didn't go through a strategy phase, and it just got built. And now they're sitting with a pretty steep monthly maintenance costs, along with the app that no one wants, and they're losing patients. It compounds. It's a very slippery slope.
There's a distillation process that you take people through, essentially. Yeah. It's like they start with all of this stuff, and let's take some time for all this to ferment and just get down to the basics. Let's distill it down to just what we need. Zen comes to mind as I think about it, and I frankly love the simple applications. That was one of the attractions to Google when it first came out years and years ago.
Compared to Yahoo, it was one field, one button.
Yeah, it was very simple to use. You didn't have to walk through all of this eye candy just to get to what it is you're trying to do. Um, and I get caught in that trap of making things more complicated than they need to be. I just went through. So I do a forecast, right? What do I think sales are going to be for the next 6 months, and what do I think labor is going to need to be, and whatever. Um, and I just have to work through that, and I need to put it somewhere. So it's in a spreadsheet, of course, because spreadsheets are very good for dealing with numbers and calculations like that. So, and I built this really nice spreadsheet template
Yeah.
that could do all of these cool things, and it's like it's preventive maintenance work versus time and materials work versus project work and customers and blowing it all out, and all the formulas are working. I couldn't get my damn forecast done. Like, I'd sit down and look at the sheet, and I just couldn't. I ended up with creating 3 new tabs. Each tab's got 4 columns, and it's like customer, month, what kind of revenue do I think I'm going to get on that project? So it's the name of the project, what kind of revenue, and how much am I going to have to pay my staff to do that kind of work. And it's like, I can enter 5 cells. I got my forecast done with 3 tabs and 5 columns on each tab versus this very complex, elaborate. I fell into that trap myself. We
But you know what?
crap way too complicated.
But it's natural. It's literally the process. It's not an efficient process. It's typically messy and chaotic. It starts with a pretty substantial or exhaustive brain dump, and you iterate from there. We never really start as simple. I mean, it's sometimes it's easy to start simple, but you want to make sure that you are covering ground of all the different edge cases usually. And that's where the strategy comes in place, where we get everything out and then we isolate what's most important. And typically it's like 3 tabs or 3 pages or 3 buttons. But before that, it's always 25, 30, just a huge exhaustive list. And essentially you're finding the signal among the noise, but you have to identify the noise first. And then the signal becomes more apparent.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, golly, I fell into the trap. What are the 4 steps we can use to really make sure that we're on the simple path?
Yeah.
That we're on the path that's going to work, that will make sense for folks.
It takes using it too. It takes just sitting down, using what you built to realize, oh, okay, I can remove 10 columns because I'm just not using them. I can remove 1 extra page because it's just not effective. It's not a fast process. It's a slow process, quite frankly, but that is the way.
And you bring up the beauty of mock-ups, right? I'm sure that's part of what you do is you mock up screens, and like, this is what we think they're going to look like. What do you think? How do you think that interaction is going to go? Is that what you were envisioning? And if it wasn't, what were you envisioning? And are there problems with what you were envisioning? So, So that brings me to the question of people who want to shortcut the process. I know what I want. I don't need to do design.
I don't need strategy. What do you do strategy for? I did strategy in my head. It's done. Let's build it.
Knock those people off the ledge. I'm curious how you deal with those folks.
So honestly, when people are that aggressive, I like to understand why. Usually it's because they've been sitting on an idea for years and they attempted to get it built and it didn't go the way they anticipated. So they're sitting and it's like, just a lot of pent up creative energy, I suppose. In other cases, they did enough research to justify a lot of things that's in their head. And they don't need to go through additional research with additional people. But I like to tell people it's very similar to I worked in healthcare a lot, so a lot of my analogies are health related. But imagine going to a surgeon. I'm sorry, it's like noise outside. But imagine
Yeah,
going to a
it's
surgeon.
raining outside, folks. I got thunder going over here, and I
Yes,
get
thunder
you
is crazy right now. But imagine you're having heart issues, okay, or at least it feels like you're having heart issues. Your chest is having pain for some reason, um, and what you do is go on WebMD, you diagnose yourself, and you do that for like 3 months because you didn't decide to go to the doctor the first time. You're gonna wait, see if you come back a few times. So you peruse WebMD for 3 months. You're pretty sure you have something substantial needs surgery, and you go to a surgeon and say, "Hey, fix this." That's equivalent to what people do when they come to me. They want me to conduct surgery. I didn't do my due diligence. But when the real world, what happens is your doctor would say, "Okay, I appreciate your research. I'm going to do mine because I'm the professional here." And then they proceed to do research and tell you, "Oh, you have gas. No surgery. Do some sit-ups. Go take a quick jog. You're not having a heart
Yeah.
attack. Stop laying down right after you eat." Like simple things, but it almost turned into a surgery because you diagnosed yourself, and you shouldn't. You just shouldn't.
Yeah, I've had multiple experiences where people tell me what they want, and they know what they want, and I don't need to talk to their people, and I don't need to do design, and it's never ended well. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've built marketing request systems that don't do what the staff needs them to do, but the marketing manager was insistent that she knew everything. Signed off on the design, we built it, and there was no budget left to build it right after her people finally got to see it. And I've told business owners, look, you can prevent me from talking with your people, but that means this project will fail. And fortunately, we didn't engage, and I'm okay with that because the experience would have sucked for both of us.
Yeah, and they'll blame you at the end, So
Mm-hmm.
it's it's a marriage when you decide to embark on these paths with this size of projects. Um, if I can't talk to people other than the person that's paying for it, I don't want to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
Just full
So
stop.
we're
And that's
we're almost out of time. I want to touch on a couple things that you had brought up when we had talked earlier. Like when you're engaging clients on legacy or existing systems, they're suffering and they need it improved. You'll ask questions like who built it first, because that gives you information. Um, and then in 2 years, we meet at a conference and celebrate. What are we celebrating? Like, what a great question, honestly.
yeah.
And then the other thing is like clicks for Mary. So if we reduce Mary's clicks from 5 to
So
2, like, did that really matter? Um, if Mary's doing 100 transactions a day, maybe it did matter. But if
I mean,
Mary's
it can give
doing
Mary
one a
back
week,
3 hours. Yeah, I mean, it can give Mary back 3 hours of her day. We simplify by saying clicks, but in reality, those are steps in the workflow. And
yeah,
if we can make that more efficient, we can get a lot of time back to Mary and allow Mary to be more intelligent about how she does her job
yeah.
and the better quality of life too.
All right, so stay tuned. We're gonna have a couple things that Darryl's gonna give you that you can, just think about on your own or try on your own as you're working on projects. I just want to take a moment to let people know how to get a hold of Darryl. So that's the phone number and the website. And I gotta ask, why Area 87?
Um, you know, I once wanted to build the studio, like physically build it. It was going to be one part studio, one part vertical farm, one part greenhouse. And it was going to be where we, conduct our workshops and things like that. It's still on the roadmap, but that's the ethos of where it stems from. But
Okay,
yeah, like a
so
North
the
Star, essentially.
area, what does the 87 mean?
It's ambiguous. It's one of those numbers that comes up in my life a lot, and I just wanted to like bring some significance to it. But 87 is a significant number. I didn't choose that number; it chose me.
Ah, interesting. Okay. All right. Gotcha. All right. And then if folks need to get a hold of me, there's my info. feel free to call, hit my website. I do have a free software audit. So if um, you're not sure if I can help, or if you're not sure that you can make your life better, I have this process. I come in and evaluate your systems and how you're doing things today. And there's a questionnaire that's involved, and then we have a meeting and spend about an hour together talking. Usually it's useful. Usually people walk away with, the last one I did, they gained a much better understanding of how 365 products could help their business. They're now brewing it over to figure out, what's the next thing to do, whether they do it themselves or not. So I didn't ask you this, Darryl. Do you have any offerings that you engage folks with?
Yeah, well, I like to do strategy sessions with people. I just like to spend time to educate people on their options.
Mm-hmm.
When people come to me, they typically are entertaining lots of people, and it's easy to get caught up in everyone selling you. So I try to be the kind of the signal among the noise. But we do product strategy, user experience design, and I do consultancy for people who have existing products, but they kind of like trying to figure out what next, or it's off the rails. They want to get it back on the rails, or whatever the case may be. I typically can help out.
Yeah, I think on your website you have some kind of like free initial engagement, or is that right? Yeah.
I give you an hour of my time, and we sit down and figure things out with each other. It's a good way to get to know the person you work. Yeah, no risk at all.
Right. All right. So as far as some takeaways for the audience, things that they can try on their own, or things to keep in their mind as they're dealing with that next software project or enhancement. What are a couple things that you'd love people to consider or to try?
I'm a big advocate for education. I would say, step outside of your idea and educate yourself on the domain. You know, it's easy to think about ideas. Everyone has them. They're cheap, but it's not as fun to think about the risk factors. So one, educate yourself on the entire life cycle of building software, and contrast all your ideas with risks. It would quickly dissolve that huge list you have, and you'll be much more grounded when speaking to people like myself, because it's the first thing I do. I think about all the risk factors before I entertain any project.
Mm-hmm. Spoken like an engineer. Any other takeaways?
I think the biggest takeaway is to make sure that whatever you are building, it brings value to everyone involved. Not one person should see value in a product that's being built.
And this brings me to a point that you and I had discussed earlier as well, is like you have to talk with your people ahead of time.
Everybody.
You have to be willing to expose the idea to people and get it shot down, or get somebody giving you a better idea, or
be ready to defend it.
It's a bad idea. You got to do that. And if you're one of those people who like to sit and think, that's going to be uncomfortable. But you got to stick your neck out and do it. And it's always worth it. I've had multiple phases in my career where I've realized I've got to get out of my cube and go talk with so-and-so, or life is not going to get better. Work won't get better. I won't be doing projects that I enjoy and that are useful. Or I have to pick up the phone. That's actually one of our core values, is initiation. You got to take the initiative and pick up the phone and talk with the customer and ask the hard questions. So you have to engage the people around you.
Take the sales hat off. I tell people all the time, like, take your sales hat off and go just talk to people. Be a therapist to your own product. If people have opinions about your business, you want to hear them. The people inside the business, people outside the business.
For sure. So, alrighty, sir. It was great that you could join me, and there was some good, useful things that were brought to the surface and discussed. And we'll see all our viewers at some other time. Thanks.
My pleasure, Joe. Talk later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.